Welcome to the DCTV News at Noon program. I'm Kendra Cook.
And I'm Jerry Tope. The Southwest TV Translator Association underwrites the news, and Dolores County Broadcasting Network provides the support for DCTV.
Here at the News at Noon show, we present news we hope you find interesting and report on local issues and events. Give us a call with news tips or topics you'd like to see covered. The number is 677-4119.
We appreciate you watching DCTV. Today's show is live Wednesday at noon. Mancos Elementary's principal, Epps, was injured in a January 2nd crash. As reported in the Cortez Journal, and the Mancos School Board members on Monday discussed potential short-term solutions for the absence of elementary principal Kathy Epps. Epps was injured in that crash at the intersection of County Road 40 and Colorado Highway 184, about 3 miles north of Mancos. She hit a patch of ice coming off the county road and slid into the path of an oncoming semi-trailer. That was according to Colorado State Patrol. She was airlifted in critical condition to Farmington with injuries including head trauma, a punctured lung, and a broken clavicle. Superintendent Brian Hansen told school board members in Monday's meeting that he does not expect her to return before the end of the school year. "We are praying and thinking of her every day," he said. In the next few weeks, Epps will be transported to Craig Hospital in Denver, Hansen said. She will spend at least 6 to 8 weeks there for rehab for her head injuries. A page on the website Caring Bridge is being updated with information on Epps' condition. Hansen told board members that hiring someone in interim position in Epps' absence would cost around $17,000. That would be a deficit spending item that's not included in the district's 2017 budget. Hansen said he had some ideas for people who might be willing to fill in for Epps, including some retired principals. Another option was to have Hansen and athletic director Heath Showalter work longer days to cover the extra hours needed for elementary school administration. Board members agreed that it would not be appropriate to add more to the workload for Showalter and Hansen. They told Hansen to look for someone to hire as an interim principal.
Reported in the Durango Herald, an oil and gas lease sale that would auction off about 840 acres near Chaco Cultural National Historical Park will proceed on January 25th after 5 years of challenges from opponents. The Bureau of Land Management announced this week that 4 parcels spanning Rio Arriba and Sandoval counties in New Mexico will be on an online auction at 9 a.m. In 2012, the parcels were authorized for leasing by the Mineral Leasing Act and the BLM's Farmington office's 2003 Resource Management Plan, spokesman Zach Stone said. The proposed sale immediately was met with opposition from a coalition of tribal members as well as environmental groups who say energy development would affect sacred lands and adversely affect communities. As a result, the proposed sale was delayed 3 times over the past 5 years and spurred the BLM office to launch an extensive community outreach effort to garner feedback. After a review of last Wednesday's proposed lease sale, Tso and Shiprock Chapter President Dwayne Chiliyazi said the BLM did not effectively take public input into consideration. Tso said tribal leaders met with BLM's New Mexico State Director Amy Luders on Tuesday to plead their case again, with the hopes of delaying the sale for the 4th time or canceling it. The tribal activists argue the BLM's environmental assessment does not fully evaluate the impact of drilling in the area, whether it be health impacts to residents or damage to sacred lands. And they are quick to point out that the BLM's 2003 Resource Management Plan was drafted before fracking technology became a commonplace form of extracting oil and gas reserves. The BLM says in its environmental assessment that energy development in the region is not expected to have significant impacts on the environment and that further evaluation is not necessary.
Dolores School District is pushing for an on-campus clinic and counselor, according to a report in the Cortez Journal. Dolores School Superintendent Scott Cooper announced during last Thursday's school board meeting that he wants to partner with Southwest Open School to establish an on-campus clinic for students. Cooper said he's in the beginning stages of working with Southwest Open School Health Clinic to establish a satellite extension in Dolores for students and their families. He said he also hopes to hire a full-time counselor. School board members agreed a clinic and counselor should be a top priority. Southwest Open School Clinic in Cortez offers physical examinations, immunizations, substance abuse education, and other health services to anyone in the county under 21 for reduced fees. It receives funding from the state. Right now it has only one location, but Cooper said Southwest Open School staff approached him last summer about a Dolores location. The Dolores district and clinic have applied for a planning grant from the state. The first step in a process, Cooper said, will likely take several years. If the first grant goes through, the district will apply for a bigger one next winter, which would pay for the clinic's construction, he said. With budget cuts on the horizon for the district, most of that construction will have to be funded by grants. Representatives from the Parent Teacher Association and other groups in the school district have written letters in support of the grant. In that meeting, the board voted to write a support letter of its own. Although the grant process will take time, Cooper says that Southwest Open School Clinic can help Dolores students immediately by offering annual child welfare checks, which involve both physical and mental health. Cooper has asked clinic staff to visit Dolores this year to help Nurse Brisbane perform these checkups on student athletes. The clinic's behavioral specialist has also expressed interest in working part-time in Dolores. The board's discussion comes in the context of a recent crisis in mental and physical health in Dolores. In December, longtime Dolores doctor Alan Scott Burnside retired amid a review that alleged improper prescription of painkillers. Burnside denied all allegations, and the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies stated there has been no final action in the case. In November, the school district flooded the campus with up to 42 counselors and mental health specialists to help students, teachers, and parents in the wake of a student's suicide, which occurred amid allegations that the girl had been bullied. And in August, the death of a former student triggered awareness of the problems of drug addiction and the need to address it.
Record, Monticello, Utah. San Juan County will be the first stop of the new Secretary of the Interior if he receives Senate approval for his position. Ryan Zinke, the nominee for Secretary of the Interior, made the commitment to Utah Senator Mike Lee during his confirmation hearing on January 17th, saying, "I'm absolutely committed to restoring trust," he said in response to a question by Lee. "If confirmed, I have committed to coming to Utah first and talking to the governor and talking to the people on the ground." The questioning revolved around the December 28, 2016 designation of the Bears Ears National Monument by President Barack Obama using the executive powers under the Antiquities Act. The 1.35 million acre monument includes 27% of the entire landmass of San Juan County. The seemingly limitless power granted to the President of the United States under the Antiquities Act is troubling, said Lee, before adding, "I hope that if you are confirmed for this position, that one of the first things you do is come to Utah. I encourage you to talk to some of the people who have been affected by the monument designation by the President on December 28th. He continued saying the President designated 1.35 million acres in San Juan County, our state's poorest county, against the overwhelming opposition of the local population of San Juan County, against the opposition of all 6 members of our state's congressional delegation against the position of our governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, and all of our statewide elected officials. Will you consider visiting Utah and talking to the people affected by this monument decision? And based on what you hear, consider having a conversation with President Trump about revisiting this unfortunate step. In a previous question, Lee asked Zenke, do you view local support as a necessary precondition to the creation of a national monument under the Antiquities Act? Zenke replied, it is absolutely critical to have state and local support on a monument that they participate in. He outlined his approach. If confirmed, Zenke said, if you start at the local community level, the grassroots, and you build and there is participation, then you get ahead of the problem. Zenke said that he would get community support and make sure your governor and your elected leaders are behind you. Zenke currently serves as a congressman representing Montana. And now, let's take a look at the weather.
The local ski areas should be pleased with the weather today. Clear and sunny with fresh snow to enjoy. I learned this morning skiers call this the bluebird condition. You ever heard of the bluebird of happiness? This evening should see high clouds move in as the systems arriving here to midday tomorrow approach. The National Weather Service says the first of these systems is the weakest, but will bring mountain snow that will be heavy at times. A rain and snow mix is expected in the Grand Valley, and Durango could see 2 inches of snow by Thursday night, as snow elevations are expected to be lower with these systems. The system pushing into California now shows abundant moisture for them in the Pacific Northwest and those coming our way. All the computers are in agreement for now on the timing and moisture in these systems. The first wave will leave early Friday. The second will arrive Friday night and into Saturday. Both promise 2 inches or so of snow in lower elevations. Mountain passes will be affected. Sunday, another wave will arrive. At this point, Sundays look stronger and will carry on into Tuesday. Each storm is expected to accumulate more on top of its predecessor's totals, at least in the higher elevations. But with our daytime temps expected to be just above freezing to the middle 30s at Dove Creek, we might have another messy set of storms. Chill factors at the time will determine how much we accumulate at any given lower elevation and or the depth of mud. Winds are expected to be in the upper teens as these storms come through, so drifts and blowing snow are also possible. This means work for the CDOT crews all over the state will be ongoing, and travel will either be no fun or way too much fun. The system over the northeast U.S. will continue tracking eastward and out to sea. Patches of light rain and snow are expected across New York and New England for the day. Winter weather advisories are in effect for eastern New York to New Hampshire. There are also storm warnings across parts of New Hampshire and Maine where the greatest snow totals are expected. Conditions are expected to improve by tomorrow as the storm moves well offshore by then. Heavy rain and thunderstorms will remain across the deep south through tomorrow as the southern portion of the cold front does a stall for today and a new surface low develops along that. The highest rainfall totals are anticipated from southeast Texas to Tennessee, where a few inches more rain is expected. Some strong thunderstorms are also likely and could produce localized flooding. Across the Pacific Northwest, it's very active again with heavy rain and mountain snow. Flow from a strong low-pressure system west of Washington coast will keep this up. This storm will provide California and much of the Intermountain West with significant precipitation. The heaviest rain is expected for the coastal mountain ranges from northern California to Washington. Strong and gusty winds are also likely near the coast for those higher elevations. Our high temperature models for the next 5 days have tracked with unusual consistency for the last few days. For the forecast tomorrow, we're at 40 and then mid and upper 30s for the rest. Lows will travel from the upper 20s down to the upper teens for Saturday night and then up to the mid 20s. Snowy and a little blowy will be coming. Melting or not, we'll see. And now back to the news.
Colorado has a controversial plan to kill deer's predators, according to a report in High Country News for the Cortez Journal. Mammals research leader with Colorado Parks and Wildlife, Chuck Anderson, comes to a spot in western Colorado's Piawan Basin for 9 years to radio collar mule deers and does checks with their health before winter sets in. Since the 1980s, Anderson says the basin's mule deer population has dropped by 40 to 50%. Mule deer throughout the West have experienced decline during the same times as here, says Anderson, and that's left a lot of people puzzled. What's happening here echoes what is happening in many other western states, where oil and gas extraction and housing development have put more and more pressure on wildlife populations. State wildlife departments in Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, and other states have been trying to boost declining mule deer numbers for decades. In Colorado, the latest proposal has already created controversy, killing cougars and bears in the Piawance Basin and the upper Arkansas River in hopes of increasing deer numbers. Critics argue that the primary cause of the deer decline is massive habitat loss rather than predation, and say that Colorado Parks and Wildlife's own research supports that thesis. The agency's studies seem like a thinly veiled attempt to appease hunters and blame predators rather than development, says Delia Malone, Wildlife Committee Chair for the Sierra Club's Rocky Mountain chapter. There's a whole host of human causes that have diminished the ability for mule deer to thrive, Malone says. Historically, we've tried to scapegoat large carnivores as the bane of our existence. On the Roan Plateau, the 7-member field team utilizes helicopter drop-offs to move tagged deer around. Before tackling Colorado's mule deer problem, Anderson studied energy development's impacts on mule deer along with restoration of the ungulate's habitat and now predator control. It makes it difficult to do objective research when you've got all these political entities pushing these different directions, Anderson says. We're not pushing any agenda here, we're just trying to learn how these systems work. The Piawance Basin, Colorado's mule deer factory, is home to the state's largest migratory mule deer herd. Mule deer are considered a good indicator species of ecosystem health because they require a wide array of plants for forage and shelter, including sagebrush, juniper, mountain mahogany, and pinyon trees, the same plants that other wildlife species such as sage-grouse also rely on. The deer are also an important revenue source for the state, bringing in millions of recreation dollars annually from hunting and wildlife watching. Hunting licenses for all game species provide about 60% of the Colorado agency's wildlife-related revenue, funding research, hatcheries, and education. This won't be the first time the state has targeted carnivores in an attempt to hike deer numbers. In 1992, a predator control study conducted in the Piawance Basin found that even after coyotes, the dominant predator in that area at the time, were reduced. Many fawns died from disease or starvation because the deer were at carrying capacity, at a population density 3 times higher than they are now. They showed habitat conditions were the biggest limitations, Anderson says. Here on the Roan Plateau, researchers are seeing hefty fawns in the fall, and starvation is rare during winter. But fewer of the young deer are making it to the winter in the first place. Anderson says about 50% of radio-collared fawns are eaten, primarily by mountain lions and black bears. Researchers will consider predator control a success if fawn survival increases by around 15%, determining whether predation is a main limiting factor for mule deer populations in those areas or if other conditions like habitat would cause fawns to die anyway. The predator removals by the state will start in spring 2017 and cost $4.5 million for both sites, partly funded by federal aid. Up to 25 black bears and 15 mountain lions, or 1 to 2% of either animal's total state population, will be killed in May and June for 3 years in the Piawance Basin and the upper Arkansas River. The predators will be caught by snares, traps, or hunting dogs and then shot. Parks and Wildlife says that it will use remote cameras at trapping sites to identify females with young and attempt to relocate the families at least 30 miles away instead of killing them. Any female lions or bears that show signs of nursing will be released back into the area.
Wars and rumors of wars. Are we in a war with the planet or not? I wonder how the planet will respond to a little saber rattling, a little diplomacy, or a little rhetoric, maybe placations and platitudes. 2 degrees Celsius, the point at which climatologists believe the world will start to experience particularly dangerous global warming, might not be matchable. Professor William Nordhaus of Yale University says it's no longer practicably feasible to keep the level of warming to within 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and the world can no longer avoid dangerous global warming because countries have done little to tackle the problem apart from spout rhetoric. This would see devastating storms, droughts, deadly heat waves, and floods all becoming significantly more common, making some areas of the planet increasingly difficult for humans to inhabit. The U.S. military, among others, has expressed concern about the security implications of the mass movements of people that such scenarios would likely bring about. Nordhaus again says regarding those bad things brought about and chances of slowing and stopping them that this is the case even with very stringent and unrealistically ambitious abatement strategies. This is so because of the inertia of the low of the climate system and of rapid projected economic growth in the near term and of revisions in several elements of the model. A target of 2.5 degrees centigrade is technically feasible, but would require extreme, virtually universal global policy measures, he said. Professor Richard Betts, head of climate impacts research at Met's Office Hadley Center, said Nordhaus's analysis did not mean the world should give up. It seems that there are some wars giving up can't win. Betts wrote in an email, "The economic side is outside of my expertise, but on the climate side, I see that Nordhaus's model assumes a climate sensitivity, that's the global due to doubling CO2 temperatures, near the middle of range estimates. Note that the mid-range is a preferred place to begin an evaluation of cost estimates for purposes of discussion. The International Panel on Climate Change range estimates climate sensitivity is actually quite wide," he says. So if it turns out that sensitivity is in the lower half of that range, then it would make 2 degrees centigrade more feasible than Nordhaus suggests. Another way to say that is if it is at the best possible of our estimates, we may have a chance. Another study in November suggested the Earth could actually become more sensitive to greenhouse gases as it gets warmer. So much so that average temperatures could potentially rise by more than 7 degrees centigrade by 2100.